All right, sweet. So I'm recording now. In case there's other folks joining. Oh, I see someone's typing. What software does Teams use for transcription? I think it's just the built-in software. Like, it's not a third-party software that we use. Like, the Teams team created the software. We actually had a workshop on it recently where someone said they use NLP, so like natural language processing for captioning or transcribing as well. So to be honest, I'm not sure, but it's something they made. I'm happy to look into it further and find out for you. All right, sweet. So a bunch of us are already in the call. Yeah, Brandon, I just saw your comment. I'll find out. You know, I'm not sure actually. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to make sure your Teams meetings are being inclusive and making sure that when you set one up, you're just ticking off all the boxes to make sure you're being as inclusive as possible. And thanks for joining and taking some time out. This will be a shorter session because technology isn't as up to par as it should be yet. Like, we obviously have done a lot to make sure that we're inclusive of all different types of learning styles and different disabilities or people with disabilities or abilities, and different accessibility standards, but obviously there's still such a long way to go. So there's a couple of tools and tips and tricks that you can turn on and turn off within Teams to make sure you're just having a more inclusive meetings. Before we begin, I'd love to know who's in the room. So are there any IT admins or folks that kind of manage Teams for their organization in the room? If so, this might be a little bit different for you because I don't go too deep into that side of Teams, but all that content is obviously still in there as well. But this is more so for individual users, people who kind of just have meetings with their, like if either you're a people manager, whether you have employees within your organization or people you work with or just people you talk to, just some cool things that you can do to make sure you're being inclusive. This isn't a super formal webinar or a workshop where I'm pretending to be a Teams expert, but since I work for the Microsoft Reactor team, we're very closely tied to the Microsoft Learn team. And Microsoft Learn is basically this hub of workshops and trainings and learning paths and modules that you can do for online learning. And there's different content on there. So there's stuff about if you want to be a Power BI developer, or know more about the Power Platform or Microsoft 365 or Azure, and you can learn about that similar to other things like Coursera or LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com, and those online websites where you can learn different things. The good thing about Microsoft Learn is that you can actually get certified right on the website. So you take the learning path, just like free courses, and then you can apply to take the exam. And right now it's discounted, so they're only like $15 or so USD per exam, but they're usually a little bit more, but due to COVID, they're discounted quite a bit. So I saw that there's, different inclusion and diversity and accessibility modules on there. So for the past few weeks, we've been doing these Tuesday workshops on different forms of accessibility and disability, starting with just an introduction to what is accessibility, and then going all the way into like inclusive marketing, inclusive design. So all those recordings from the past weeks are up on our YouTube, and I'll link the YouTube in the chat. But they're all up there. So if you wanted to go back and watch any of those recordings, I've kind of gone through those Learn modules and summarized them into these short 30-minute to 1 hour webinars where I just kind of tell you what it is about. So if you don't have the time to kind of go through something, you can just watch this. Will we have the certification again? I'm not sure. So I think so the certification discount, so for those who will watch the recording later, someone asked in the chat if that certification discount will be on again. I'm assuming that's what you meant. I'm not sure because it's only discounted for people who have suffered job losses or are interested in kind of changing their position in the market. But obviously everyone can attest to that. So yeah, they're discounted quite a bit. I think usually they're about 100 or 200 depending on how technical the course is, but right now they're $15. So I'm not sure how long that will last since it's only during COVID time that it's discounted. But yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry to say that, Monique. I'm not sure when COVID will end. Hopefully when it does. Yeah, hopefully when it does, it helps. But yeah, so we can begin. This will be fairly short. So the agenda for today is just we'll spend 5 minutes talking about captions, transcription, sign language interpretation, any background effects, things like that. Then we'll go into some features that can enhance participation in your meetings. And then we'll go into some simple tips and tricks. Obviously, if you're using Microsoft Teams, you want to be as inclusive with people with disabilities as possible. You want to proactively consider for these users and make decisions about your team's environment for these users. There's a bunch of different features in Teams. Obviously, it depends if you have the paid version or free version, but this is just general for most people. And there's just ways that you can make your environment more flexible, more inclusive, and just be better for people who are interacting with you. All right, so a little bit about me for those who haven't joined the workshop before, and I know a couple of you have, so this might be repetition, but I manage the Reactor program in Toronto. There's versions of me in different parts of the world. Reactors are basically hubs where we host programming, virtual programming, and some of it's very technical, some of it's more for personal business development. And outside of work, I actually run a children's book business creating inclusive literature. I'm very passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Previously, I've worked in design, UX, marketing, and so on. And those are my links. You can find me there. A little bit of background about disabilities in general and disabilities in the workplace. There are currently 1.5 billion people with disabilities across the world. I'm going to share some Canadian statistics, but I'd encourage you to check the statistics in your own geography. But currently in Canada, 1 in 7 people live with disability, whether that's permanent or temporary. So permanent would be anything like blindness, mobility issues, any neurodiversity challenges. Or it could be temporary, like you have a broken arm, because that also counts as a disability, because if you have a broken arm, how you interact with the world is going to be different. Or if you have crutches, things like that. So those are just things that's going to happen as the world is increasing or growing and developing. That ratio of disability is going to increase more. So instead of 1 in 7, it's going to be 1 in 5 people that are have different ability concerns. So that's just something to think about, that as you're interacting with your coworkers, your managers, your companies, you will never know, because sometimes disabilities are invisible. So it's just best to try your hardest to be as inclusive as possible, because you don't know who's in the room. But just in general, just best practice in the workplace is to just try it, right? So that's just kind of a fun statistic. Not super fun, but something to know. So these are just some like generic framework of disabilities that are kind of widely regarded in the world, how people have different accessibility functions. These could be cognitive concerns, so whether you have ADHD, OCD, things like that, or depression. You have mobility concerns, like you use a wheelchair. Vision could be color blindness, you're fully blind, you have cloudy vision. Hearing, obviously you're deaf or have sensitive hearing, or tinnitus, if I'm pronouncing that right. Speech concerns or sensory concerns. So there's many different types of disabilities. A lot of them, as you'll notice, are very invisible. So when you're in a Teams, oh, hi, Mad. Someone just commented. But yeah, so ton of concerns that people might have. So it's just best to take the right steps to make sure that you're being inclusive of all these types of folks. Obviously, Teams is not cutting edge software yet. Like, we could do so much more. So as product is getting better and better, and there's more feedback from folks that use it, it helps a lot of people if you kind of share your feedback. Anytime you use a product, if you have some feedback that it's not working well, please tell the developers and they'll include it in the next updates. So this really helps everybody. All right, so to begin, let's talk about captions and transcription. If you're a Microsoft Teams admin or you're running a Teams meeting, you want to make sure your call is inclusive of all people with disabilities so they can participate and contribute, even for temporary disabilities. So maybe if you're doing a call, people can't really hear you because they're in a loud environment, so they turn captions on. So that's kind of a situational disability because they're just in a loud environment. So it's just a good way to make sure you're being inclusive. Captions and transcriptions are basically text versions of the words that someone's speaking. They help people who are hard of hearing, people with learning disabilities, with dyslexia, so on, to also see text in addition to the audio. They also benefit people who are deaf, or maybe people with sign language interpreters who you can't see because they're off camera. There's just some situations where those are really helpful. Captions will appear in real time on screen with the audio, and transcripts play for users in sync with the audio for any recorded meetings, if that difference makes sense. Transcripts on Teams are available separately somewhere else, so they can just download that, look at it later if they'd like. Live captions happen at the same time. To turn on live captions, here I'll just made a quick video demo on screen. You can check it out. But basically, if you go on the top bar on Teams, you can just click those three dots, turn on live captions, and they'll just turn on underneath. Currently, live captions are only available for more commercial Teams tenants and like government organizations and so on. But if you don't have the option to turn on Teams live captions, ask your IT person at your company, or if you are the IT person, you can go in your admin center and turn those on for everybody. So just look into that. Transcripts. So once you record a Teams meeting, so this is for folks that are hosting it, not that are attending a meeting. With Microsoft Teams, you can let people record meetings, and it auto-generates transcriptions for the conversation. So you don't even have to turn it on most of the time, as long as you've recorded it. Once you record a meeting, it goes into something called Microsoft Stream, which is that window on the right there. On Microsoft Stream, any recorded meetings, they're all just hosted online there on the cloud. So it's not, like 10 million movie-sized files on your computer device, kind of slowing it down. They're all up in the cloud. You can go and just download it there. You can turn on closed captioning. It'll add automatic captions on there as well. You can download videos. Here, I'll just play a little thing there. So if you go in My Content, you'll see all your meetings that have come there. And if you've recorded a meeting, you'll notice that there's a ton of them there from previous workshops. If you click on Edit Details, it opens this page for you where you can change the description, the title, anything you'd like. You can choose a video language. So since my video was in English, I'm just going to choose English there, and it'll let me kind of, oh, there we go, choose English there. I can auto-generate captions. I can download the file of captions. I could even upload my own subtitles if I want to do that. Turn on comments and so on. There. So you have a ton of options with after you've recorded a Teams meeting to do things afterwards. So maybe you forgot to add captions or turn on live captions or anything like that. It'll auto-generate based on the language that was spoken afterwards too. So no worries there. And if you're sharing that video recording with somebody, you can do that. All right, next one. So in your organization, there could be folks who are deaf or use sign language interpreters to participate and contribute to meetings. So inviting those external users to have guest access is really important. Sign language interpreters usually don't work for the organization you're part of. So for example, if I'm part of Microsoft and I'm hosting a webinar and I wanted to invite a sign language interpreter, most of the time it'll be someone from an external organization or external group or nonprofit or something like that, or like a consultant or something that's coming in to do that talk and like interpret as the talk is going on. So if you're someone who manages, the Teams program at your organization, you want to make sure they have access to use everything and join the meeting. So there's something that you can do called guest access. So you can give people guest access to join your Teams organization. All that happens is it allows teams within your org to collaborate with people outside the organization and gives them access to different channels within Teams. Anyone with any kind of account like Outlook, Gmail, Hotmail, if you still have Yahoo, you can be a guest in Microsoft Teams. You can, and like as the IT admin or as the person who's managing Teams at your organization, you can set this all up to see what kind of controls they're able to have. So if they're able to share video, if they're able to message people, if they're able to see any old files, anything like that, like you can control that. All you have to do to add a guest to your Teams tenant, so your Teams as a whole, is basically create a Teams channel and add a member to that. It's very straightforward. Oh, can everyone still see me? Hi. Just comment in the chat if you can still see me. Something just went out.
I can still see you.
Okay, you can see me? Okay, great. I don't know, for a second, everyone just disappeared in the meeting chat. But yeah, okay, sweet. Perfect. So all you have to do is just create a channel. There's like 3 dots next to the channel name. You just click add guest. You can send them the invite and they can join the channel that way. So, you know, this is really helpful if people don't have Teams and they usually use Zoom or something like that, and you want to do, yeah. So you can just do that. There's guest access available. I'm just seeing some comments in the chat, but yeah. One more thing I would also say is a really good tip for future reference, and this is something that I just did for this meeting as well, is to always make it automatically admit people to a meeting. So for example, for today, a lot of you, when you joined earlier, you were in a lobby waiting to be admitted, right? So that's actually not a good best practice for if you're trying to have an inclusive meeting, just because for folks with mobility concerns, or they're using screen readers, or they're navigating in a certain way, they might have to click join meeting, wait in the lobby, accept, and so forth. It's just more of a user experience journey for them. It can be a little bit difficult. So it's best to just let people be automatically admitted and just turn that setting on in your meeting options. Obviously, if you're waiting to start a meeting at a certain time and people are waiting in the lobby in advance, that's a little different. But yeah, automatically admit is great. Another thing for interpreters, so right now there's only me that's talking and presenting, but sometimes everyone who's in the meeting has their camera on, and yeah, sure, they might be muted, but as different voices are going up and down, for folks who are hard of hearing or deaf, or doesn't that allow for Zoom bombers? So someone commented in the chat saying, doesn't that allow for Zoom bombers? So Microsoft Teams is set up a little bit differently than Zoom, where there isn't a unique ID code that you can just enter within Zoom. And so how Zoom bombers actually work is that they just kind of type in different codes into their end of the URL, and you can just enter random meetings that are happening on the off chance that that code actually aligns with a meeting. So it's really it's very random. Anyone could do that, but Teams is a little bit more, I think since it's more enterprise focused and more organization based, it's a little bit hard to just jump into any Teams meeting because there isn't like a code like that. So it's not really set up that way. It's a long URL with like very custom tags. So it's very hard to kind of zoom bomb on Teams. But yeah, so I would just say, to kind of wrap up the sign language interpretation part, another really good tip for folks who have difficulty seeing the sign language interpreter is to pin the videos of people who are most important, because as people talk, Teams will pick up that audio and bring them higher up, and they have a larger window and kind of focus, and it's more dynamic. They have dynamic view. So what you can do with dynamic views, you can pin different videos that are most important to you, so that as people are just laughing at something, camera doesn't go to them right away. So turn on dynamic view. That's also in your meeting options. And with dynamic, you can just pin up to 4 people. So that's great. All right, moving on. So these are some things to keep in mind that you can do, simple, small things for your Teams meetings. Some people in your organization might find it difficult to focus during video meetings and calls because of movement, light, other distractions in the background. Whether users are neurodiverse and they prefer to control these distractions, or they're hard of hearing, so they need to lip read or understand what people are saying. Reducing these distractions, and you can control these distractions, will make a better experience for them. So for example, for folks who might have ADHD, if you have a lot happening in your background, or you have some sort of dynamic movement or something, yeah, it might be really good design and look cool, or showing your dogs moving around and stuff, but it can be very distracting. So a good practice, or a best practice that's kind of come out in the accessibility world, is if you have the option to blur your background, or have a static one color black or something like that background, so it's less distractions for people who are watching you. Yes, you can put on fun backgrounds if you'd like, But if there's 10 people in a call and everyone has a fun background, then it can be very distracting because you're not really listening as much as you are being distracted in a conversation. And this obviously is heightened a lot for people who might be neurodiverse. So that's just something to keep in mind. Background effects really help people focus on the speaker rather than the background. There's a ton that you can upload your own or just use the generic ones, but background blur is considered a good practice. Yeah, and then the next one I would say is to turn off incoming video audio sounds. So for today, for example, I did allow everyone in the meeting options to be able to unmute their mics, just because this is kind of just a conversation. So if you wanted to say something, you could unmute and say that. But for future webinars and any meetings that we usually do, it's just a good practice to, in the meeting options in advance, just make sure that people can join muted, and you have the option to kind of mute them. Because if people join and their videos are on right away and their audio is on, even if they're not saying anything, there's like fuzz, static noise or fuzz. It can be very distracting as well. And all of that's getting transcribed. It's getting in your official transcription and in your recording. So for folks who are, they can't really hear, but they're reading transcription, it can be so confusing because people might say, oops, sorry, my mic's on or something, and then unmute it again. So those things like that just creates a bad experience for people who really need it. So it's just best to kind of make sure that turn off incoming audio and incoming video in advance. If people need to turn it on, they're mindfully then turning it on versus it's default on everything and then they turn it off after, because then it's all just going to be a worse experience. The last thing is noise suppression. So background noise can happen for many reasons, whether it's like ambient sound, typing sounds, even my own mouse clicking sounds that as I'm going through these slides, it's clicking through these slides. So it's like tick, 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 coming in through. It can be very distracting for people who are suffering with disabilities or are born with disabilities or have any concerns, accessibility concerns. It can be hard to focus and understand others in that way. So you can enable noise suppression for any recorded meetings. So same thing, you go in Microsoft Stream, go in Edit, update details, and you can turn on noise suppression. And what it does is automatically kind of mutes those sounds. And it's a pretty powerful software. I tried it a bunch of times and it was pretty good. So I would recommend you do that if you're sharing your meeting recording anywhere. All right. So how to enhance participation in Teams meetings. So these are 3 tips as well. If you want to make sure that people and users in your team meetings have options and control and flexibility, they can participate in a way that works for them. So not everyone can type in the chat with the same speed. So as I'm talking, if you have a question, you're able to type it right away. But not everyone will do that if they're using, a certain kind of smart keyboard. They're using a screen reader, navigating in a certain way. So, when people are like, oh, if you have any questions, leave them in the chat. Maybe they're not able to participate really fast like that. And you move on to the next topic and it's over for that participation ability. So I would recommend the raise hands feature. So all these things you can turn on in your admin center if you don't already have them. But if you click raise hands, you'll see on the left there, everyone who's raised their hand in a team meeting, they kind of get grouped together in the order of how they raise their hands. So if, for example, in that example on the screen there, Serena Ribeiro, she has a raised hand or they have a raised hand, and we'll just be like, oh, Serena has a question, we'll go to that question, and then we know that Danielle and Babak and Adi and Pete and all these people have questions coming up as well. So it's not as confusing. There's a chronological order to how people need to talk. So do that. I know like now it's pretty casual, but in large meetings with a lot of people, this is a lifesaver for a lot of people because it's so distracting and confusing sometimes. So yeah, raise hands so you're not turning your mic and saying, oh, excuse me, I have a question. Just click the raise hand button. That's really helpful. The second one I would say is together mode. So research has shown that people, and this is research that Microsoft has done and other people have done, people feel disconnected and more fatigued when you've moved to remote working. Just joining a meeting, like they did this research where as soon as you hear, oh, I have to join a meeting, instantly their stress levels spike and all these things happen. And even if you might not notice it, it just happens. There's less idea sharing, more fatigue, lower productivity, strained mental well-being, a lot of things with remote work. So they did this study and they found that basically your brainwave markers associated with stress and overworking are way higher in video meetings than any other work that doesn't involve video meetings like emails. So if you turn on together mode, they found that it actually enhances that, or like it's not as bad of a stress or fatigue that comes in your brain as soon as you hear about video meetings. So if you turn on together mode, it helps support employee well-being by reducing that feeling of fatigue. And they did this research and they found that you exert less effort, you're better able to focus on people's faces and body language and interpret nonverbal cues. And this is very, very helpful for folks who have disabilities because, for example, if you have autism, you really thrive on nonverbal cues, right? To kind of process thoughts and emotions. And obviously people with autism are on a huge spectrum. So it varies for everybody, but things like nonverbal cues and seeing body language, it really helps. So if people are in a meeting and everyone has their video off, because obviously it is very tiring to be on video call all day, try together mode because it did some research and it actually helps a lot of people feel a sense of society, sense of being part of something, and it doesn't feel as fatiguing. And with together mode, there's fun versions too, like you're in some rocks or something, or you can be in a spaceship and things like that. So it can be kind of fun. People feel like they're in the same room and they can interact in that way versus, you know, feeling that sense of detachment with all your coworkers. So try on together mode, even if it seems silly. Research shows that it's actually better for you in some ways, so just do that. Better than having people's floating heads everywhere. And then the last one I would say is messaging policies. So a lot of these are probably already all turned on for you, but if they aren't, contact your IT administrator, or if you are an IT administrator, turn these on. But all these different things that you can turn on to make things more personalized. So things like using memes, using stickers, using GIFs, you can translate messages, you can send messages with urgent priority or not an urgent priority, send read receipts. So if someone reads a message, it should say if it's been read or not. So you can kind of turn all these things on to make a better and more custom experience for people who are using Teams. I know I love using GIFs and kind of sharing it with people like that, so you can turn that on. But the most important one that I wanted to mention is Immersive Reader. So what Immersive Reader is, it's like a tool that helps read things out loud for folks. So you can enable things like Immersive Reader, which is a capability designed for users who have dyslexia to make the text easier to consume, or provide translations for users who prefer to talk in a different language or consume in a different language. So you can turn these on, and this is really helpful for folks. Immersive Reader is available in a bunch of things, but so like Edge, Outlook, Microsoft 365, Teams. It's not a plugin or add-on. So someone asked a question, are these features optional extras in comparison to the usual Teams package? So most of these are actually for more commercial or government Teams or tenants. So if you're just a personal Teams user, you might not have access to all of them, but I would say double check in your admin center if you can. But no, they're not. It's not like a paywall thing, they're just available. But it depends on which tenant you are. So if you're a commercial enterprise, you might have a different types of Teams. Another question someone asked is, what if you have private information being discussed in a meeting and you don't want to have the chat recorded? So when you have a Teams meeting recording, the chat is actually not recorded. So a lot of the times these workshops that I've been doing, you'll notice that it's just my face with all the other attendees at the bottom and the larger screen, like the slides being shared, but the sidebar of the chat is actually not recorded at all. So that's why when you ask a question, I'm reading it out loud because the chat is not recorded. I'm not sure how you can actually turn chat recording on, so that might be something that you have to take it away, and I'll find out if there's ways to do that, but as of this moment, you can't do that. Now going back to Immersive Reader for a second, Immersive Reader is like built into all applications in Windows 365 and so on, but it really was kind of created for people with dyslexia and dysgraphia. But it can be used by anybody. Some of the key features of Immersive Reader, which I've talked about in previous workshops, but I'll mention it now, is that it helps content to be read aloud. It can change text size, background color. It can break words into syllables, increases the space between letters, highlights one or more lines of text, highlights different parts of speeches. So a lot of different customizing options with Immersive Reader. So if you go in your messaging policy center, so you should be able to use Immersive Reader. It's kind of built in most Windows things, so please check that out. Best practice, like one quick add-on, as a best practice with Teams is that if you're ever sharing an image with users, people might be using screen readers to chat or collaborate. So make sure you add alt text, which is alternative text to the image. There's a lot of ways to add alt text, but basically what alt text is like if you have an image on the screen. So for example, right now on the slide, I have this image of together mode with a bunch of people sitting in like a theater style. So if I'm sharing that, I would just add alternative text to anything that I'm sending. So I would just say image of Teams feature together mode, which shows different people in a theater style or something like that. Just so if people are using a screen reader if they're part of the Teams meeting, maybe they're not able to, maybe they're blind. So the screen reader is reading aloud to them like what's happening in the meeting. And you share an image, they won't see it. So have the alt text so that the screen reader can see it. You can just even put it in the chat, if anything, and so that they can read it out loud. So that's really helpful. All right, so I know we kind of sped through a ton of them, but quick summary. You can enhance existing features like captions, transcriptions, make sure you're using those, reduce distractions for folks, and then enhance participation with a couple of these tips and tricks. And I know I only touched on a couple of them, but if you have any other questions, please let me know. I'm happy to even, if you'd like to do a deep dive into Teams, I'm happy to connect with folks on the Microsoft Teams team to bring them on and do a workshop on something in particular. But I just wanted to chat about how some of these Teams features, usually they would be less flexible in a traditional work environment, but now that we are so virtual, you can make the environment that you work in a little bit more flexible, inclusive for the people that are using it with you, and not just how you communicate with your language, but also physical and technological things that you can do to do that. And yeah, so that's kind of the end of the workshop. Everything that I talked about is on that link at the bottom there. So aka.ms/MS Teams Inclusion -2. You can go there. You could even take that module if you'd like, complete the module, and share that you've done this learning on LinkedIn if you'd like. It's super quick as well, so it wouldn't take too long. You could just skip ahead through all the content that I talked about and go straight to the quiz and publish it. I think it's like a 3-question quiz. But it just shares that, you know, you've done a little bit of the work to be more inclusive in your day-to-day life, and hopefully that helps other people around you. But yeah, so that's the end. If you have any questions, please let me know, put it in the chat. I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability. But if not, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate everyone coming out. This is the last one of the series that I've been doing for the past 7 weeks. Robert Sharp. So someone commented, I spent a short amount of time looking for additional D&I courses on MSLearn. Where can I find these? So yes, I'm happy to share that with you. So here, let me go to MSLearn. So basically there's a couple of them. There's 4 of them on accessibility fundamentals, which I did the first 4 workshops on, which included digital accessibility, language, and so on. So I'm happy to share that with you. If not, we actually have a YouTube playlist that I'll put in the chat right now. And all of the MSLearn modules are on that. Here, let me just quickly pull that up. Thanks, Arjun. So Arjun just said, thanks, a cool intro on how to make Teams more inclusive. Many thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to help. Sorry about that, my computer's so slow. But yeah, let me pull that up. So here is, oh my gosh, it is so slow. Apologies. I'm using a Surface Book. I need to upgrade it. All right. There, that's the YouTube recording. So all the previous DNI related MSLearn modules that I did are all on there. Here. Oh, put a double link there. But they're all on there. And then the others are here. Pardon me for having such a slow computer. Come on. Here we go. So Robert, here's one of the modules that's part of that accessibility and diversity learning path. So this one's actually that intro to accessibility, for example. That one's part 1 of a 4-part series. So if you go on that, you can actually go through all the different modules, cover them, and the recordings are online, so you can just watch those videos if you'd like, take the quizzes at the end. And then you actually get an accessibility fundamentals trophy at the end. For today's workshop, for example, it's just one course, so you could share that, I completed the course on it. But that one actually gives you a badge that you can put on your LinkedIn if you'd like. So if you wanted to go through that learning path, please feel free. And then I did 2 more on inclusive, 2 more that aren't part of any learning path, but one was on inclusive marketing and one was on inclusive design. So if you're interested in that, those are on Learn as well. Personally, these are the only I found. So these 7 were the only I found on MSLearn. So if you wanted to take those courses and share externally that you're doing some inclusion work in your personal time, I would say maybe start here. Should be a good stepping stone. Any other questions?
Hi, Iman, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Hamad.
How are you anyway?
How's it going?
It's going fine. I mean, I think it's not raining in the UK. It's quite sunny today. So that's quite good. Okay. My question was, you were talking about that, for example, that you get certain people, certain users, okay, in Teams or for example, certain people who might have issues with typing a question in chat because either they've got dexterity issues or even, for example, they can't type up fast enough, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I've seen in Teams, you don't have a voice message recording facility, do you, at the moment?
I'm sorry to say, Hamad, it's kind of hard to hear you.
Give me 1 second.
And someone asked for the inclusive marketing chat quickly.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, no, what I was saying that, for example, right now, in Teams right now, okay, whereas I've seen up till now in Teams that you can only type any questions in the questions section, okay?
Yes.
Or even in chat, questions, right? But as you know, that sometimes people have problem with the dexterity, and because of that, they can't really type fast enough, or sometimes they have problem even typing a question, yeah? So I was wondering that I don't think Teams has the facility right now to send a voice message in questions.
So there isn't the availability to do a voice message, but I think most keyboards now, and even Teams will allow that as well, where if you're using your phone or your computer, you can do voice to text and then press enter on that message and send that message. So you can just voice to text with your computer keyboard or phone keyboard rather than the Teams keyboard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. It does make sense because as I said, that for example, some tend to prefer that to communicate through voice comparison to maybe using your fingers basically to type this. That's basically I was getting at. That's what the was about.
Yeah.
And the last thing was that, remember, I think you were mentioning that, for example, mentioning about the color background, yes, because as you know, in certain eyesight conditions, yes, some people, quite a lot of people, they can't really bear, because of the eyesight issues, they can't really bear bright backgrounds. Let's say white color. White color can be quite blinding actually sometimes. So I mean, in Teams right now, do they have the ability? Is there an ability to change the background color? I mean,
of Teams itself.
Oh, I mean, can you? I mean, are you able to change the background color? I think there was one slide you were talking about.
Yeah. So the background color, like the background behind me.
Yeah. No, not behind you. Yeah, basically in Teams, right?
Yeah, you can do that. So you can, if you just go on meetings details or meeting options, here I can change it now and show you. Here, if I go on my camera, sorry, pardon me. Yeah, I can change my background. I can upload different things as well. So I can just upload a blank black or white background and just change that. So that should not be an issue.
Oh, I see. Okay, I just thought I'd find out. Okay.
Yep.
And, yeah, I think.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Hamad. Thanks for sharing your questions. Anyone else have any questions before we wrap this up?
Much.
Yeah, thank you. All right, sweet. So it looks like that's about it. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. If you want to watch the rest of the sessions from the previous 6 weeks, those are all up on the YouTube channel, which is in the chat box on the right. So you can go check them out there. And yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.